Hi, welcome to week 2, lesson 1. Today we're going to talk about stress and PTSD. What I've found in my work with people who've experienced trauma is that when we have PTSD, it gives us an even smaller level of resilience when stress gets high. So let's talk about stress and how to manage stress, how to think about stress, and that's what we'll be doing this week. So let's get started. Why is it important to address stress? One of the things that I have noticed is that when we have had trauma, if we've had the diagnosis of PTSD, our coping strategy is often to sort of hold our breath and push through and cope. It's like we want to just clench our teeth and close our eyes until the terrible, stressful thing is over, and then we'll move forward. The problem is that we cannot anticipate when stress is going to be in our life, when it's going to get worse, when it's going to get better. And it often doesn't get better when we hope that it will. So it's really important to recognize that your level of resilience for dealing with life and for healing your PTSD symptoms is going to be dependent on addressing your stress in a more effective way. So, the other thing I want you to realize is that every time you address stress, kind of closing your eyes or holding your breath and pushing through and coping, you reinforce your trauma responses. If your trauma responses in your body are not paired with healing strategies, then more and more events in your life are going to create narrow and narrower experiences that you can have and enjoy in your life. It's just the nature of stress, and it's the way PTSD responds in our brain. So if we don't do something to help you heal, life is going to get smaller and narrower and less enjoyable over time. So let's change that. First, we need to look at what the physical consequences are of chronic stress even when there's no PTSD. So we're talking about people who are otherwise healthy, who haven't experienced trauma. This is the list of chronic stress for consequences for people with chronic stress. And this is based on what medical findings are for long-term stress. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, heart disease, stomach and digestive problems, chronic pain, arthritis, headaches, diabetes, asthma, difficulty sleeping, obesity, and fertility problems. Now, I know that if you have PTSD, you're thinking, well, gosh, I have some of these symptoms already. I'm telling you that many of them are stress-related. Living with PTSD is like living with constant stress. So we have to address stress first, then we heal the PTSD symptoms. Next, we're going to look at the mental health consequences of chronic stress. Again, remember, mental health consequences of chronic stress before PTSD comes on scene. So with chronic stress, we can find ourselves irritable and angry, anxious, having difficulty sleeping, feeling too tired when we shouldn't be, feeling sad or depressed, losing interest or motivation or energy for things that we used to have energy for, getting headaches, frequently feeling like crying, having an upset stomach, having constant muscle tension, and decreased interest in sex. This is chronic stress. Now remember, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, if you've had a traumatic event or trauma that has left you with a PTSD response, your body reacts to everything as if it's stress. So, where a healthy, non-traumatized person may have a wider cushion for managing stress, if you have PTSD, it's smaller because that PTSD is making you live with chronic stress all the time. This is why we have to address stress. So let's begin by... And so I'm going to back up. I said, let's begin. I was thinking the next slide. So I like this picture, and the reason I chose it is because when people talk about stress management, they'll say, take a bath, take a walk, do something to help you relax. And I look at this image and I think of a woman who has PTSD. She has less resistance to stress. It's harder for her to bounce back from something stressful that happens. And I don't know about you, but I can sit in a hot, relaxing bath and continue to stress out in my head if I allow that to happen. And this picture kind of illustrated that. It's like she's guarded still and not relaxed and not regulated enough in her body and mind to even relax and enjoy that bath that's full of warm water and fragrance. So it really does kind of bring home the idea that if we have PTSD, we have to have a more intensive approach to how we're managing our stress to make ourselves well. Now let's talk about the definition of stress. So stress is an external event plus our internal response. It's that simple. So let's think about a stressful event. Traffic, heavy traffic. So that's a neutral external event. Our internal response is what tells us whether or not that's stressful. There are some people who will see this kind of traffic and think, oh, that's me time. I'm going to listen to a book on tape. I'm going to have nobody around me distracting me from my thoughts. So this is a time when I actually can de-stress and calm myself down. Okay, some people think that way. The other response is, oh my God, I have to sit hours in traffic again. I'm losing my life. I'm wasting it away in traffic. I could be doing so much better things. See, the second response is an internal response that actually induces stress hormones in our brain. So let's use another example. Okay, the external event is someone around you gets upset. Let's say someone around you stubs their toe and yells out in anger and pain. Okay? If you understand that as somebody hurt themselves and has nothing to do with you, then your internal response will be, oh my goodness, let me see if I can help. Let me see if there's anything I can do to help this person feel better. You're not going to feel so much stress. But if you've had trauma, if you've had people around you who don't handle anger well, then your internal response could be, oh my goodness, someone yelled, I'm not safe anymore. So the external event is a stubbed toe or a traffic jam. The internal response is what determines whether or not that becomes a stressful moment for you or not. And as I'm using this example of somebody stubbing their toe, if you've had trauma, you can see there are thousands of interactions that happen in day-to-day life with other human beings. And those are thousands of opportunities for external events to get registered in our head in a way that we create an internal response that creates stress for us. If that is what happens, then we're already raising the floor and we're having a smaller threshold of ability to deal with stress, because events that should be neutral really become stressful for us. That's why we have to look at it. I'm going to add a layer now. So let's talk about stress with PTSD. So stress is an external event. Remember the traffic jam? She is now feeling stressed because she's thinking about what happened. When we've had trauma, we actually get activated by memories. We don't have to actually go through that thing again. So even, for example, when you've been before in therapy or in PTSD healing groups, and people start talking about their trauma, or the therapist asks you to talk about the details of the events, your internal response is going to be, again, stress, fear, helplessness. Okay? So I want you to understand that stress by itself is just a response, internal response to an external event. When you have PTSD now, there's another layer, because there's the events and there are memories of events. And so now we're talking about kind of double stress, things that are neutral becoming scary, And then the stress of dealing with PTSD can become its own stress. So we really have to look at what we can do about this. I'm going to talk too about the impact on relationship and your body. So trauma always occurs in relationship. If you even think about it, there are times when trauma can occur and no one is around. I've heard about people whose parents left them at the hospital for a procedure or didn't accompany them, left them alone at a hospital while they were yet very young. That happens in relationship because the question is, where was my parent? Right? Why wasn't I there? Who was there to help me? That's also, add that to the reality that when we have an angry parent, when we have a neglectful parent, we have someone who caused us harm, that happened in relationship directly. And so then we grow up and we look for attachments. Maybe we find a close relationship, but we also have friendships. We also have work relationships. Those are all relationships. And in relationship is all our trauma brain needs to say, oh, there's going to be a stress response here because you're in danger, right? So we want to reduce our brain's signaling to us of danger, but we need to also be actively responding to the stresses in our life so that we can reduce the level of reactivity in our body in general. So I just said that. We have to look at the thought patterns that lead to our stress. That's our internal. And we also have to physically develop strategies that help our body calm down. Because we're telling ourselves things in our brain and that's activating our body. So in order to manage stress and to deal with it and to heal our PTSD, we have to heal the thoughts so that it doesn't lead to stress, our PTSD response, and we have to calm the body. They're both necessary to heal from PTSD. If we don't do both, we're going to continue to have the same responses and have potential illness. So how do we do that? First of all, you have to make yourself a priority. So this example of mom sleeping when her kids are taking a nap. Many people who've had trauma, who have children, when the kids lay down for a nap, that's time to make ourselves busy and get things done that we couldn't do otherwise. That teaches ourselves, we're teaching our children that we have to be always on, that it's not okay to relax, that it's not okay to rest our body. Moreover, it actually trains that scared, traumatized part of our brain that we cannot rest. It's not okay to rest. One of the things that I noticed as I started to really work on regulating my body and calming my body is that resting felt scary because as a child I was never safe. So over the years I developed this way of running and always thinking about what's next and never turning my brain off because that prevented me from resting. When I stopped and required myself to rest and quiet my mind, my body sent me memories of fearful experiences where it was like almost more important to stay awake and not ever go to sleep than it was to let myself rest and be in danger that I couldn't see. So think about that. Do you want to reinforce that habit in your own mind and body and pay the physical and mental consequences of that? Or do you want to make new rules? When I talk about making new rules, I talk about somebody like the stubbed toe. Somebody stubbed their toe around you. If you're used to activating and used to that stress and used to feeling afraid, you will say, oh, let me get you some ice. And like almost apologizing like you're the one who is responsible for the toe having been stubbed. But if we make new rules, we can say, it's okay for me to express concern, but to let them take care of themselves, right? Making new rules like learning how to say no. Making new rules like when my kids are resting, I'm going to rest too. Making new rules like I'm going to breathe and relax after I eat. Rest and restore. Instead of getting up and running as soon as I finish my last swallow. And I have this other note here that says social group in prioritizing me because inside Trauma Nation, Trauma Free Nation, we have a group called Prioritizing Me. That's for focusing on making ourselves priorities and talking about the rules that need to shift so that we can do that. So, next 2 lessons. The first one is we're going to be evaluating the impact of long-term stress on your health. And then the next lesson, we're going to be talking about the impact of repeated PTSD cycles over time. At the end of the 4th lesson today, you will have homework assignments so that you can start evaluating and making changes for yourself. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Keep any questions in mind so that the next time we have our Q&A this week, you can bring up those questions and we can talk about what comes up for you when we're talking about stress and PTSD. So we'll see you in the next lesson.